Okay, everyone, welcome back. Today we are talking about two more ways to invite or request or to deliver, suggestions or demands about what other people should or shouldn't do. And again, today, this happens a lot with the pre-intermediate grammar in Japanese, but we're going to be learning, especially this first one, prohibition, learning Japanese that you probably don't want to use yourself. Or if you do use it, you're going to use it very rarely. You will hear it though, depending on the type of media that you read or see, and so it's definitely something you need to know. But with prohibition, Japanese is a language of 1,000 different politeness levels, and there are much nicer ways to say things. But if you want to know, or rather, you want to know what someone is saying, even if they're not being nice. I know you all. You'll do your best to be polite when you should be polite, but let's get this in that tool bag just in case you need to be really stern with someone, or you have a child and they're about to step out into the road, and you want to make absolutely sure they're not going to keep going out because the car is coming by. Let's talk about prohibition. So we talked about commands, different types of commands last time. And again, we'll talk about two types today. One is one that you'll hear, but I hope you don't use too much. The second one is one that you will definitely use. And prohibition, if you didn't know, it's telling someone not to do something. And, it's before we jump into it, let's talk about other ways that we can say, don't do something. So let's go back to my example. A nightmare that I think every parent has is your kid doing something that puts them in danger. And let's say that there's, a car coming and they want to cross the street and they don't see that car coming. You're trying to tell them to stop. But in the first case, you still want to be kind to them. And they're not so close to the street that you only have a half second before, something terrible happens. Your first one, the most polite one that we always learn first is that naide kudasai. So if you want to tell someone, please don't go, that please is in there. Ikanaide kudasai is typically the one that we learn first. It's the safe one. It's polite. You're not going to make anyone angry by saying it. So we have that. If you go in the more casual route, you can drop that kudasai and say ikanaide, don't go. And pay attention to the tone of my voice. Don't go. That's about the level that it is. And just in case you didn't know, you can add the ne on the end of it to make it sound a bit softer. And we were talking about that in the Discord a couple days ago. We learned ne as a kind of a way to prompt the other person in the conversation to respond back to you. You're almost asking for confirmation. You want them to agree with what you said. Along those lines, but not exactly the same thing, ne can often be used to soften a conversation or soften a statement and make it sound more friendly, more conversational. And before we continue, let me tell you a small story. I had some dental work done here in Japan just a few days ago. And I'm sure you've all been to the dentist before. And you have all had the situation where your mouth was open. There were tools jammed in your mouth. And they ask you a question. And you think to yourself, I can't answer. Ha 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 ha. And your mouth is, you can't make the sounds correctly. And you think to yourself, why are they trying to talk to me? I can't talk. This was happening at the dentist. In this case, they weren't asking me anything. They were just saying, oh, next I'm going to apply some air pressure. Or next I'm going to put some water in to rinse it out or whatever. And one of the things that the dentist said, she said this. She said, "Mizu o kakemasu ne." I'm putting on some water. And she had no intention or suggestion of having me respond. She obviously didn't want me to respond. But she still said that ne. But it sounded friendlier. It's almost like I'm putting the water on, all right? And that's not, in that case, there wasn't I should say, okay. In that case, she was just letting me know. If you were to drop that ne, it sounds more like, I will now apply the water. It sounds a bit more clinical and a bit drier. And that ne adds a bit of a friendly feel to it. And so you see ne happening in this case, where ikanaide means don't go, but ikanaide ne means don't go, okay? It softens it a bit. Okay, back to prohibition. Those are the ones that we just talked about. Those are the ones that are safe. They're generally polite, and so you can use it, regardless of who you're talking to, without being too worried about, oh, did I say something that upsets them? Now, this next one, though, is not that. This the prohibitive na is like saying something and then taking your words and like punching your words into their head. That's the strength that comes behind this. Is if your words were like manga style, leaving your mouth and there are these big, bold letters slamming into the side of their head, that's na. So if you say neruna, you sound angry. You sound angry or upset or something. There's a strong urgency and power behind those words, just with this one character. So in English, it's still translated the same. Like ikanaide means don't go. Ikuna is also don't go. However, it is extremely strong. Extremely strong. And it's very easy to make. It's just this na. There's no conjugation. It's just the base form, the dictionary form of the verb, and you're throwing that na onto the end of it. If you had to translate it and write it, I might put 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 exclamation points after the end of it. So neruna is don't sleep. Ikuna is don't go. Suruna, don't do. And kuruna, don't come. I think of the ones that you have possibly heard before in drama or anime or whatnot, kuruna comes out more often than not because maybe there's bad guys and they're coming closer to you and you're like, don't come any closer, kind of thing. It's kuruna, don't come here. Or maybe you're sick, you have a virus and you don't want them to get sick, but you don't want them to think for a second that there's any possibility of them coming. You're like, absolutely do not come over here. I have a virus, it will kill you. Just don't. It is extremely strong. Now, because of the strength behind this, you don't have a lot that you're saying. These tend to be fairly short. So if you're a parent and your kid is trying to go to sleep and you're like, don't go to sleep, your homework's not done yet, you might, and you've already told them a few times you can't go to sleep yet. You've been friendly with them, you've been patient, but they're not listening, and this certainly isn't something I've had experience with yet. And then you say at the end, neruna, shikudai ga owatte nai yo. It's like, don't sleep. Or almost, if you would translate it more liberally, don't you dare sleep. Your homework's not finished. It sounds like that. Or if there's a dangerous area, maybe there's some broken glass, and your kid or your friend tends to not listen to people when they say something. You tell them no, and that makes them want to do it all the more. You want to make sure absolutely they don't go, asoko ni iku na. don't go over there. Don't do something like that. そんなことするな. Or, and then this is the one, like I said, you'd hear, because you can use this without being angry. You're just maybe worried or scared about something. 危ない。来るな. Don't come over here. It's dangerous. And so these are different ways that you can use this. And the next few panels actually just go through what's already on there. So we just covered that. I'm going to jump through these. And yes, as we mentioned before, it's if you compare it to nasai, it's stronger than that. If we were to compare it in level difference, we had. Let me write this out for you. Positive and negative. Here's your most polite. Nette kudasai. Nenaide kudasai. Please go to sleep. Please don't sleep. You might say nennasai, go to sleep. That's a bit stronger. There's not really a negative one that matches this in terms of level. But if you are getting angry, or want the strongest possible form, then you've got on the positive end, you have nero. On the negative end, you have neruna. So again, these are kind of last, it's the last thing you can do. And it can be useful. But again, how often do we need to say something that strong in English or whatever your native language is? Not that often. And so just like this, it's not going to, be something you hear commonly, but you might hear from time to time. And when it does, you should know when you hear that, okay, that person is really frustrated or angry or scared. I probably should listen to what they're saying. If you give me just a minute, I'm going to have a quick drink. I'll be right back. All right, let's practice this one a little bit. I know it's kind of a tricky one to practice right after I said don't use this that often. But just so we can get a bit more in our heads, because we're in a classroom, technically, let's pretend that you all are the teachers and there's a group of rowdy students in front of you. And you've had it with these kids. Everything you've tried to tell them, they don't listen to you. What are some things that they might be doing that you would tell them not to do? What are some things they might be doing in the class that you would tell them not to do? So, for example, if I'm a teacher, I definitely don't want my students, eating in class. And maybe some kids are eating some candy in the corner. And I say, tabemono taberu na. Because I'm just going to change it and just say some sweets. Okashi o taberu na. That might be something I say. So think of some bad things that kids could be doing, and let's make the negative don't do that form. Now this is compared to what we were doing before, this is the pre-intermediate event. Feel free to use kanji if you'd like. And don't forget that you can always use the Kao-chan with a little question mark to get Kao-chan to jump in there and say, oh, hey, this is what the reading is. So mayonnaise is saying don't sit on top of the desk, which especially in Japan, I don't think it's a great thing in a lot of countries, but in Japan it's definitely a no-no. Megumi is saying stop talking or don't talk. Shoyu is probably talking to people that aren't in the class, but maybe they skipped school the last couple of days. Nibutsu has an interesting classroom where people are, I guess they have a karaoke box in the corner of the room and they're trying to bust it out. Fuzorito, if you were using that form, you don't need the na. The na only comes up when there's a noun afterwards, so it would just be shizuka ni shite. Perfect. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to say a few things that I'm going to say it in English that, a teacher might say. And if you can't think of anything else, feel free to try translating these into Japanese. So let's use the one that we had before. Don't sleep. What would don't sleep be? Okay, how about this is a really bad class. How about don't drink beer? Don't drink beer. And Yuya made my favorite mistake. I like when people make that mistake because it's a chance to say this. Yuya is asking them to not drink a building where everyone else is saying to not drink beer. And I've made that mistake numerous times, even knowing them. It just they slip back and forth, and especially the English pronunciation of beer. It's not beer, it's beer. So you kind of want to make it short, but beer is short for building, a building. It's an abbreviated form of that. Okay, one more, and you'll see why. You'll see why I say this, but this is a good cultural point, and because today's lesson is short, I'm kind of adding extra things. How do you say "don't screw around"? Don't screw around. So I see a couple of answers. They are correct. And some of you might be wondering, wait, I learned that as something else, something that I cannot say today because it's not good English to say, especially as a teacher. But this is really important. I want to point this out. Fuzakeru is to like play around, to screw around. So stop, like don't screw around is fuzakeru na. Now, please don't type it, but I think a lot of you have probably read this or learned this as the F word. It's that word in English. And what's really interesting is in Japanese, a lot of the curse words, that we have in English, there's no such thing in Japanese, where this word in Japanese means this curse word regardless of situation. Whereas some of the bad words, some of the four-letter words we have in English, you wouldn't use them regardless in certain situations. You just wouldn't. The other person would say, "Oh my goodness, well, you can't speak like that." In Japanese, though, what we consider cursing often takes the form of context and how angry or not angry that person happens to be. And so, with this word, I could still hear, and I have heard teachers saying this in the past, a teacher that was angry. And they were definitely not saying it at the level that the four-letter word in Japanese or the English would be. They're not saying the Japanese version of it. They're saying, "Quit screwing around." But maybe because in certain situations, it could be translated that way because there is no good word in Japanese to match those curse words. That translation became common and popular, and people, maybe subtitle translators, want to be a little bit edgier in some situations because it's a bad guy and they're fighting with each other and they say this bad thing. But the word itself, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not a bad word inherently. It's the tone in which you use it, how angry it sounds, the other words that are around it. And so it's not an inherently bad word in the way that a lot of English words are. Okay, putting that aside, don't think if you hear someone say that they're necessarily cursing you out. They could just be using it in the way that it originally was, which means to screw around. Okay, let's go on to the second and last form that we're talking about today. This is one that you can and will use very often when you speak, conversationally. The volitional form, now that word isn't one that we commonly say, even in English. It's this one. It's the let's do this, let's do that. Let's play, let's eat, let's drink, let's go to the moon. That's the volitional form. And before we talk about the one that we're going to mention today, there's several ways of saying this. And we've learned several of them so far. So let me ask you, what's the most formal, not formal, but what's the most polite and indirect way you can ask someone to do something together? So if you want to say to someone like, shall we eat? What would you say? There we go. It's that masenka. So putting out the full word, you might say tabemasenka. And there's a question mark on there, which, weakens it. Instead of saying let's, it's like, would you like to? Shall we? And, there's a question mark in the English as well. And, what would the next level be? Can anyone think? It still has a question mark on the end. What's the next one that's not quite as soft? It's a little bit stronger. It ends with a ka. Mashoka. Exactly. So it's just a slightly less, not less polite, but slightly stronger version. So we have tabemasenka. We have tabemashoka. I'm going to go ahead and edit my previous one. Both of these are still questions. So there's still the idea of the other person can say no. I'm giving the person a question and letting them answer. The next one would be, again, we've learned this one, tabemasho. Now this one is let's eat. There's no question there. So there's kind of the presumption that the other person is going to go along with it. You're not really asking them. The one today is the yo version. And because there's another word that is yo that's used a lot in grammar that we're going to come up on, often, and this is in Renshu as well, you often see it written this way. It's the yo form of the verb. And it's the most casual version yet. So it's on the other end. It's the let's do this, but it's more casual. You wouldn't say it to, someone that you would usually use polite language with, but among family, among friends, you could use this. And it's really easy to form. It's similar to the masho. And here's how you make it. Okay, sorry about that. We had a bit of a connection issue, but it seems like it's better now. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and talk about these. We're talking about the formations of the verbs to get them into this yo form. And so we talked about the ichidan verbs, miru, which is the easiest version. We have miru, mio. We just drop that ru and we add yo. For the godan verbs, we're making a jump, over from the U sound to the O sound. So kiku becomes kiko. And I think this is where it dropped out a minute ago, but I'm going to put some verbs out. And you all try to change those to the yo forms for me, okay? So, again, yobu. Yobu. What would the yo form be of that? I see a few people typing, which means people can hear me. That's great. Yobo. How about if we have to write something? As in, let's write Santa a letter. Kaku. What would kaku be? I see a few people typing. Kako. Okay, now let's get to some important stuff. What if you're trying to get someone to sing with you? You say, let's sing. Let's go sing together. Utao. This is the one that of all of them might sound a bit strange, and you might think, wait, am I putting too many vowels in there? But it is, Megumi is correct, it's utao. So it's in this case, it's the A-O-U all in a row, utao. Okay, let's check out the last one. Our irregular verbs, like usual, have their own way of doing things. Suru becomes shio, and kuru becomes koyo. Yes, we have a ko. So be careful with those two. Suru becomes shio, and kuru becomes koyo. So let's check out a few examples. So again, you'll notice that these are pretty short. One of the reasons being that we're speaking casually. And so, especially in the first sentence, usually you would see the wa after ashita. Ashita wa eiga o mimashou if it was a bit more polite. But with casual, there's a lot of things you can drop. And with this case, the was can just get out of there. So, ashita eiga o mio. Tomorrow, let's watch a movie. If you want to listen to music, maybe you're in the car, ongaku o kiko. Before I click down to the next one, does anyone know what that onigoko is? It's something the kids do. It's a game the kids play. It's not hide and seek, but you're very close. You're as close as you could be. Tag, yes. Hide and seek is kakurenbo, but yes, onigoko. In English we say you're it. If you get tagged, it's you're it. But in the Japanese version, if you're it, you're the oni. You're the devil. So you're the devil. You have to catch people. Let's play tag. Or if you're inviting someone over, but with the presumption that they're going to agree with it, you could say ie ni koyo. Let's come over to my house. And that's really it to this form. It's a very simple one, and because it's casual and it's not rough or anything, it's one that you can fit into your Japanese language very easily. You don't want to use it with anyone. If it's someone where you would typically use the polite language, you're going to stick to the masho or maybe even mashoka, masenka that we had earlier. But If we are dealing with friends or family, or it's a casual situation, for whatever reason, we can use this O sound. Or yo, excuse me, the yo sound. So definitely give it a shot. Before we wrap things up today, it is a bit of a shorter lesson, but do you have any questions about these two, or about if I can use this in a certain situation? Yay, Nico. No, it's not wrong. It would just depend on like where people are relative, to the speaker speaking. So if you are with a group, like you're with your friend and you're at the park, and you're like, let's go to my house, you could say Yay, Nico, because that's where you are. You are going. But if you are at home, maybe on the phone, and you're telling them, hey, let's you guys come to my house, you're already at your house, so you're not doing the coming, they are. From their perspective, it would be to go. But since you're the one talking, you're saying, hey, come on over to my house. Ie ni koyo. Is there a negative form? That's a really good question. So there's not a clean negative form that would match up to this one-to-one in the way that we had with, the positive sleep and the negative don't sleep, the nero and neruna. But in the negative form, you have several options depending on what you want to do. And I can't explain too much about each of these, but let me give you a few of them. And maybe you've heard some of these. So let's say, since Fizzorito talked about to go, let's use that verb. There's a few things you could say. Let me type out a few of them. This isn't a invitation exactly, but if you're talking, with a group and you're like, it might be better to not go, you might say, ikanai hoga ii. But that's just your thought. If you want to use this form, there's another form that we haven't learned yet, because it comes in a set of 3 or 4 grammar expressions that people always mix up. And you'll see why. We'll get to it later, probably in 2024. But there's a suffix, I guess you can call it a suffix, called koto ni suru. And a verb comes before it. Let me add that. The verb comes before it, and it means to decide to do something. And let me give you a quick example, since we have time. If you were to say this, 来年は日本に行くことにした. You're saying, I've decided to go to Japan next year. You're showing a decision. Now, you can use the negative form of this as well. So maybe you were thinking about going to Japan next year, but the money didn't work out, or the weather didn't work out, or something. You said, I've decided not to go to Japan next year. 来年は日本に行かないことにした. So it's a decision to not do something. So what can we do here if we're trying to use this new form? We could say something like this. 来年は日本に行かないことにしよう. This sounds clumsy in English, but literally translated, it would be like, let's choose to not go to Japan next year. And with this negative form, it sounds like you might use it if you are choosing to do it another time instead. So it's like, oh, it's raining, so let's choose to not go to the park today. Let's do it tomorrow. So again, it's not a one-to-one, this is the perfect thing that matches up with it, but it's something that you might hear. And koto is the same. You'd want the sonna, not sonna, but it is the same koto. Koto is a word that has a lot of usages. And moreover than that, it's technically a particle. And so it's a word that doesn't always have a direct meaning, but it covers a whole bunch of different situations. And we talk about koto in so many different expressions. And it's usually used in a pattern. And so you don't think of it so much as koto by itself, but you often see, oh, in this pattern that uses koto, the pattern means this or means that. But anyway, I hope, Wizard, I hope that clarified things. If you're looking it up in Renshu, koto ni suru is definitely in there. We have quizzes on it. We have an explanation on it. So check it out if you'd like. But if there are no other questions, I'll go ahead and wrap things up today. But if you have a question, feel free to mention it. Okay, I think we're good. Well, thank you so much today. You can find this, or you will be able to find this video inside of Discord, in the Renshu app, as well as on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, and I hope you join us next week. Bye.